Hey, it's Conrad Thompson. Thanks for checking out the podcast here on YouTube. Be sure to hit the subscribe button and the notifications bell. You'll get a notice anytime we upload some new content. And when I'm not asking Bruce, hey, how big was Batista's? Well, you know. One of the things I like to do is help people save money. And if you're watching this video right now and you're in a 30-year loan, man, you're overpaying your single biggest bill and you may not even realize it. I want you to do a little experiment for me. Take your calculator out, multiply your monthly house payment by 360 payments. That's how many payments there are in a 30-year loan. That big scary number, that's your total of payments. You're looking at that number? You know you can do better. Keep more of your own money right now and go to savewithconrad.com. Or maybe you've got credit card debt. Man, it's not a matter of if I can save you money with that. Your average interest rate on a credit card is more than 20%. And by the way, all the interest you pay on those credit cards, it's not tax deductible. Whereas the mortgage interest, well, that is tax deductible. So if you owe this debt, it's up to you how to pay it back. Doesn't it make sense to get the cheapest rate possible and the greatest tax deduction possible? Find out how much money you can save right now for free at savewithconrad.com. You don't need perfect credit. Even scores in the 500s can be approved, and it's no cost out of pocket. But maybe best of all, we're licensed in more than 40 states. We can help more families than ever before. But how much can we save you? Find out right now for free with a quick quote from savewithconrad.com. Hey, it's Conrad Thompson, and you're listening to Grillin' JR with the voice of wrestling, Mr. Jim Ross. Jim, how are you, man?
I'm good, Conrad. Good to talk to you this morning. It's a beautiful day here in the Jacksonville Beach. I'm glad to be above ground, and I'm looking forward to this show. This is one of the most entertaining Royal Rumbles I think WWE maybe have ever had. So it should be a fun show, and some other news we can talk about here, there, and yon. So let's get after it.
Let's do, man. The 2001 Royal Rumble is very special. Of course, almost everyone listening to this holds WrestleMania 17 in high regard. Well, this is the precursor for that. This is going to sort of set the stage. Let's catch you up where we are here in January 2001. Kurt Angle's our world champion. Stone Cold Steve Austin, the franchise. He's returned from surgery. The Undertaker is the American badass, and WCW is just about to go out of business. And of course, ECW basically already has. Folks, welcome to 2001. This show, the 2001 Royal Rumble, went down on January 21st in New Orleans, Louisiana. It's actually the first WWE event to be held in that arena, which opened in 99 and currently serves as the home of the New Orleans Pelicans in the NBA. Attendance that night, of course, it's a sellout. 17,137 fans there. There were about 2,500 freebies given out, which is a little higher than normal for pay-per-views in this era, but the paid is still $666,700, another 93 grand in merchandise. Maybe this isn't the biggest Royal Rumble ever, but you're setting the stage for one of the biggest years ever because the franchise, Stone Cold, is back, right?
Yeah, it's pretty much the bottom line, is no pun intended. You know, knowing that Austin's coming back, the biggest star of the generation, I can't do anything but help. So, you know, we look at these great numbers for this show, and they were impressive. A lot of that could be attributed to the Texas rattlesnake.
Let's talk about New Orleans for a minute. Your old stomping grounds with the Cowboy. Were you excited to be back here? Did you have some old hangouts, some favorite restaurants you were looking forward to hitting or something like that?
Oh yeah. You know, just bar hopping, Bourbon Street's kind of fun. Go in this bar and have a drink, that bar and have a drink, the old pub crawl, shall we say, and restaurants. I think that night, if I'm not mistaken, and my memory serves me correctly, Jan and I had dinner that night at the Commander's Palace.
The best.
Yeah. Really, really good. And, the maitre d', who was going to seat us, obviously, took us to our table. And then he wanted me to go back in the kitchen and meet the staff, which if you're an eater, you know, that's a real good move.
Yes, it is.
So I go back to the kitchen and take some pictures and, you know, just thank the guys for all their great work. And I said, I'm not sure I'm going to order yet. Don't worry, JR. Mr. JR, we'll take care of you. So I don't remember even ordering that night. It wasn't because I was drunk. I don't think I even ordered. I think they just brought food. And but Jan loved that experience because it's special, and they were really nice to she and I. And we had, like you said, if you're in New Orleans, kids, and you can afford it and have the wherewithal, you owe your significant other or your buddies or somebody, you want a special meal, you can't go wrong with Commander's Palace. You can't. The only place I ate down there that I liked as much was a little hole in the wall called Dookie Chase's. And Mr. and Mrs. Chase ran a restaurant there in downtown. And that's where Cowboy and I took Muhammad Ali for 3 dinners. And I can't remember what I had. Conrad, you know, you'd love this. I had a dish that she made. It was fried potatoes and grilled shrimp cooked together, or fried shrimp cooked together. It was amazing. And if you like shrimp and you like potatoes, you're in heaven, because they season it to their seasonings and stuff.
Right.
It's just so unique, because that Mrs. Chase came out and saw Muhammad Ali there. You thought she saw the Savior, and Cowboy, me, and Muhammad, and she just took the menus off the table. We didn't even look at them. Another one of those situations where the head person wants to treat you with what they believe is their best.
Right.
So they just started bringing food. And if you didn't like the one dish they brought out, don't worry, because another one's coming in a matter of seconds. So it was one of the more enjoyable, fun things I've done. And it was really amazing. You found out that Muhammad Ali was a big foodie. He loved the soul food. And so did Cowboy and I. You know, soul food is an interesting thing. It really is just Southern cooking.
Right.
What do you think? Am I right or wrong on that deal?
No, you're not wrong. It's Old South, baby.
Yeah. So it's good. But I like being in New Orleans. That Smoothie King joint was brand new. You know, it's funny that WWE had a really unique thing about following these new buildings opening up, becoming a first. You know, I think it was the same thing with that United Center in Chicago, where the first event in there at the time. So it's kind of neat how they followed that trail. And it just brings us back to the fact of how great wrestling was when you could go to an arena that was full or pretty damn full of fans, live fans sitting there enjoying the spectacle, and how much more it contributed to the overall presentation of a wrestling TV show. We miss that. You know, I know the show we had in Jacksonville way back in December 30th, I think it was we had about 1,000 people there. And of course you see online, somebody's always got something negative to say, man. And like, well, I only saw 24 people in a crowd. How can they say there's 1,000 people there? Right. Well, because we sold 1,000 tickets and they pretty much all showed up. That's why. You know, it's not like it's a conspiracy, some deal. It's just amazing sometimes how the social media has slanted Conrad to negativity. And even as much as I love being on social media, Twitter at JRSBBQ and all that good stuff, Facebook, Instagram, sometimes it's challenging. It's really challenging because some people just believe they got to be controversial and get attention. It's sad.
Well, what's not sad is the state of affairs for business here at the Royal Rumble. This show does big numbers, 625,000 buys. It's the third most purchased Royal Rumble. Number 2 was the 99 Rumble. And number 1, maybe a little surprisingly, is the following year, the 02 Rumble. Let's take a look at how the company has grown just through the buys of this show in particular. 1997, of course, we're in San Antonio. It's a breakout moment for Stone Cold Steve Austin, but they only do 244,000 buys. The next year in 98, of course, the Austin era is about to be born. The Attitude Era is in full swing and business is way up, 351,000 buys. By 99, we're firmly in the Austin era. He's our world champ. 650,000 buys, nearly double what they did the prior year. But with Austin out, business is down a little bit in 2000, 590,000 buys. But of course, as we said, he's back here, 625,000 buys. That momentum would carry into the following year, 670,000. It's interesting to see through the rise of Stone Cold, there goes the rise of the pay-per-view buys as well. He really was, as you said, the biggest star of the generation.
Yeah. And he was, obviously the term used very, liberally, he was over.
Yeah.
People wanted to see what he was going to do next. He was that over. So, yeah, it was pretty amazing. You follow that trajectory and how closely identified it was to Steve. It's pretty amazing, especially for, the Rumble being the last major foundation laying for the Rumble, for WrestleMania. So the Rumble needs to deliver to get a good buy rate for WrestleMania, in my opinion. The Rumble feeds into WrestleMania. And, it worked out really well for us that year with Austin back. And, Austin won 3 of them. I don't think anybody else has won 3, have they?
Well, I'm sure when it's all over, Roman Reigns will win 30, but I don't know where the total is right now. I wasn't there, so I'm curious. In terms of backstage feel, we know nothing compares to the hype and the electricity, if you will, of a WrestleMania. Is Rumble second? It feels that way as a fan. Like when I get together and watch these shows with my friends, the 2 shows that people want to come over and watch, WrestleMania is number 1, but Royal Rumble's number 2.
Yeah.
Is it that way live as well?
I think so.
Yeah.
I think so because the talents know that the Rumble's creative is essentially custom made for WrestleMania.
Right.
Everything leading into WrestleMania starts or has some sort of genesis there at the Rumble. So yeah, I think the Rumble is the number 2 show, pay-per-view wise.
To answer your question,
nothing's ever going to supersede WrestleMania, Conrad. As we both know, like you said, your buddies want to come to your house to watch WrestleMania for sure.
Yeah.
But the Rumble, I think, is a solid number 2.
Steve Austin, you're exactly right. Won it in 97, 98, and 2001. He's the only guy to win 3. 6 guys have won it twice. Hulk Hogan, Shawn Michaels, Triple H, Batista, John Cena, and Randy Orton. So there's still a chance, I suppose, that Randy Orton could win another one and get up there to number 3. Let's talk about the poster here for a minute. It's a classic. It's the 2001 version of the old 91, 92, like drawing of the poster. So you've got all the modern superstars marching towards the camera. But this is a bit of a throwback because so many folks my age look at those 91, 92 posters and think it's one of the cooler wrestling posters. When you think back on your fandom, Jim, do you have a favorite wrestling poster? One where you think, man, that's a cool shot. That's worth the frame.
I think the face-to-face poster with Austin and Rock.
Yeah.
For me personally, because, they were 2 of my guys, not that they were the only 2 guys, but they were the 2 most prominent guys. I think that I signed, in all due respect to all these other millionaires and Hall of Famers. But that brought everything kind of full circle. So that was a good one. I thought, there was another one that I thought was cool. It had Austin in it also, whether these thumbtacks in his head or something.
Oh yeah. Yeah. That was, No Way Out. I think it was like From Behind maybe. Yeah, oh no. Yeah. That was the other Rumble. You're right. An older Rumble had that. It was like Hellraiser kind of.
Yeah. It's pretty cool.
Yeah.
But I think Austin and Rock face to face kind of summed up everything that we were trying to accomplish. Get new guys over, younger feel, more vibrant feel, a new thing. I said on the show a lot, wrestling fans love new. We all love new. And pretty much, and so sure. I think that that poster with Austin and Rock would be at top of my list if I'm just thinking off the top of my head.
Is it true that Vince McMahon sometimes when he thinks about his WrestleMania main event, he thinks in terms of what it's going to look like on a poster? We fans have heard that for a long time.
Oh yeah, absolutely. Well, he's a supreme marketer. He understands, that's one of the first a image of this event is going to influence a lot of interest. Does it influence them enough to go make the buy? I don't know that, but it doesn't hurt anything when you have a attention grabbing, common sense oriented poster. And that's like I said, Rock and Austin was a dream match. It was a match that we built for directly or indirectly for quite some time, and consequently they had 3 main events of WrestleMania.
Right.
15, 17, and 19. And I was lucky enough to be around to call all of them. So that's always been going to be a great memory for me in my career, is calling those 3 main events that those 2 cats had at WrestleMania. That was the event that they both needed to be in. And that's the event that they had to headline. And they sure as hell did a good job of that.
Well, this is one of the better shows that you could see. Meltzer even wrote One of the best pay-per-views in the history of the WWF. So if you're looking for a Rumble to watch to get yourself in the mood, consider this one. Let's talk about some news and notes as we head into this show. According to an item in this week's Ross report, it appears that Shawn Michaels will wrestle at least one more match in the WWF and return as a regular television character. There's basically nothing new to the story that hasn't already been reported, other than Vince made the final decision to use Michaels. Michaels, whose contract expires this summer, was wanting to be used both because he's a performer and he's been on the sidelines, and physically no doubt is feeling better than he has been out of the ring for 2 years at this point, and he's allowed his knee injuries to heal up. In fact, he did one match last year for his own TWA promotion in San Antonio. There were obvious issues of using him in the WWF, which were basically the reasons he'd been off TV for so long. Michaels, who turns 36 this summer, is claiming to have grown up, and at that age probably also realizes he does have a chance to come back, but this is it. According to the report, Michaels will be returning as a regular television character and wrestle at least one match. No decisions about anything else will be made until they see how his back holds up after the match and to see if his attitude is what he says it is. His doctor after surgery strongly advised him against ever wrestling again, which is different from Steve Austin's doctor, who was cautious, but throughout the ordeal was very positive about Austin returning. As it turned out, most are impressed with how well Austin has come back. Originally, the feeling was that Austin would work pay-per-views and only major shows when he came back, and the feeling was he'd probably only be able to work a few months, building a big farewell at WrestleMania. As it turned out, he's working a full-time schedule, and while saying he's better than ever wouldn't be accurate, he's had very good matches, and there's no indication his career is in jeopardy anytime soon. So let's take a time out here. We're talking about this Shawn Michaels return like it's imminent, but it doesn't actually happen until the following year. What do you remember about 2001 here and Vince saying, we want to bring him back, and Shawn saying, I want to come back, but for whatever reason, it doesn't happen for a whole nother year?
Well, as we've talked about here, I've made several trips to San Antonio to talk to Shawn and his then manager and lawyer, Skip. God damn, I can't remember Skip's last name. What a nice man though. He's a really good guy. So, my pitch to Shawn was always that you can't allow your legacy to end this way.
Right.
You have put a bad taste in people's mouth, whether inadvertently or premeditatedly, I don't know. And I don't really care. But right now, the perception of you is not so positive. And for a guy that's considered to be, along with Ric Flair, the two greatest in-ring performers of all time, that's just not right.
Right.
It's not right for you. It's not right for your fans. It's not right for anything. So I said, so the bottom line is for me is that I just want to get you back in the fold. I said, you can be, if you maintain the attitude that I'm seeing now, you can be a great help to, much like he's doing now at NXT. You can be an influence. He's an influencer, Conrad. I mean, he's a boyhood hero for all these cats, these kids. Shawn Michaels is helping me with my match, blah, blah, blah. I said, you can be a big benefit without ever taking a bump. But you could tell by the twinkle in his eye, he loved that challenge, so to speak. He wanted to give back, and he wanted to change his image and the perception that he had acquired. But there's no doubt that he wanted to be back in the ring. He had the ego, which is great. Ego's not a bad thing. He had the confidence and the ego that he wanted to go back and prove that I can still do this. And I said this when he came back a year later. He didn't miss a step.
Right.
He was the best guy we had on the roster as far as working bell to bell as anybody. He was as good as anybody we had after being dormant for all those months and years. So it took a while to get to past that, the physical obstacles, the medical issues, the psychological issues, and all those things. But I knew, and Vince and I talked about this, we just got to remain diligent,
right,
and give him time and have the patience for this to become his idea. I'm ready. And of course, we saw how that worked out when he came back. He's the only guy that made brown tights famous. Right? That ugly brown outfit and that Dutch boy haircut. But he was as good as I ever. Night one, right back where he was.
Right.
So it speaks to how great he is and he was. But that year, the year between years, the next year, that year waiting was, I don't want to say dicey. It was just, we were all getting impatient because we needed him back. We wanted to see him back, and him on the card made every card better.
Let's talk a little bit about where the ratings are. Of course, we know Nitro circling the drain. Their biggest rating was a 2.85 in the prior 3 or 4 months. Their lowest rating was a 1.55. Their biggest draw, according to Meltzer, when you break down who was in the main events, was Booker T, 2.23, Scott Steiner, 2.09, and then Jeff Jarrett, Mike Awesome, Sting, and Kevin Nash with a 1.86. When you're taking a look at ratings, I know you're obviously breaking down what's happening on Monday Night Raw, but since it feels like there may be an opportunity at some point to acquire WCW, you guys start breaking down WCW ratings as well from a quarter hour standpoint to see who the bigger draws are, or is it more of a gut feeling?
I think that some in the company did that. I know a lot of the guys on the creative team, the writers, were probably more diligent in that than I. I didn't do any research on it. I didn't have time.
Right.
It just feels like I didn't have time. I'm doing payroll.
Right.
Payroll is not that you can take a week off, because when you take a week off, then the talents miss a check for a week, and they're just not made for that. They automatically think something's wrong. And plus a lot of them, unfortunately, were still living check to check. So you had to pay them on time. I had to book the house shows, and that was a full-time gig.
Right.
So I didn't put it on my plate because I didn't have time to address it very well. I looked at their overall ratings, their quarter-hour ratings when it came across my desk. I certainly looked at ours. I was interested in what my guys did minute by minute to see who was getting over, because that affected how they're being paid. It affected their next contract, et cetera, et cetera. So, but nothing, I didn't spend a lot of time on it, quite frankly. I just didn't have time to do it because you do the show on Monday night, and Tuesday afternoon, you get the ratings. And then it was time to, in 5 days, to do another show.
Right.
So, it's just wasn't something I could focus on with my workload. But, there were some in the company that lived and breathed that information. So nothing slipped by, quite frankly. It's just, I didn't spend a lot of time. I didn't invest a lot of time in it personally.
Well, let's talk about some of the big successes Raw has had in the prior few months. The biggest rating was a 6.63, and it happened for a 3-way dance on October 23rd, Rock versus Angle versus Hunter. The lowest rating was the following week, Rock versus Jericho. It got a 5.05. And I'm sure a lot of people were pointing fingers unfairly, perhaps, at Jericho. His booking wasn't exactly the best in this era. Let's take a little bit of a look at who the big draws are on Raw, according to those quarter hour ratings. And this sort of shocked me. Now, this is all directly from the Observer. The top draw in the company, Triple H, 6.36 was his average rating. Kurt Angle was a 5.74. The Rock is a 5.63. Austin's a 5.53. Vince McMahon's a 5.5. I'm sorry, Benoit is, and McMahon right below him at 5.37. Boy, these are monster ratings in any era, but hearing these average ratings just based on the superstars in the context of 2021, it really blows my mind a little.
Yeah. Well, it just proves the old adage that you got a red hot heel.
Right.
He's the linchpin. People that will pay money to see a heel get his ass whipped, that heel is magic. A heel is money. And Triple H was a great heel. He was earning those ratings because he was performing at a high level against some of these other cats that you just read off. Triple H is working with.
Oh yeah.
So he had some great dancing partners, but give the devil his due, man. Triple H was a great heel in that era.
Oh, for
he really
sure.
was.
For sure.
He was a great heel. And so I think, and the fans, I've always said that's the key to being you can prove how good you are when you can motivate a fan to leave their home, pack the kids up, get in the family truckster, head down to the arena because you want to see, in this case, we're talking about Triple H get his ass whipped. I think there's more motivation to see sometimes a red hot heel get his ass whipped than there is to see a over babyface with another obligatory win that's predictable.
By the way, there's proof in the pudding on that. Ask Floyd Mayweather. Floyd Mayweather behind the scenes is a nice guy who does a lot of charitable acts and helps a lot of people, but you don't ever hear about it because it would kill his character in boxing that's made him damn near a billionaire. I mean, the guy has drawn more money in boxing than anybody, and it's following the old pro wrestling model of, hey, people are going to pay to see me get my ass whipped.
That's right. Yeah. And you're right about Floyd being a nice guy. I remember, it's funny, especially this time of the year. I really any time of the year, I think about Jan because she's not here. But he was so nice to she and I,
right.
When we worked with him, he was giving away swag and shirts and sweatshirts and all kinds of cool stuff. But he was very polite, and his entourage was polite. He didn't deal with any loudmouth bullshit.
Right.
And so, because Floyd had the knowledge that all you guys are representing me.
Yep.
It's the same thing I used to tell guys that when I was in administration, we all represent one guy.
Mm-hmm.
One guy. It's our job to make sure that he is represented as he would want to be. And we can never let him inadvertently go back on his word. If we can, at least bring it to his attention. Now, remember, Vince, we told this guy blank.
Right.
You can't imagine how many times I've done that. And it wasn't because he was trying to screw them. He would forget.
He's running a $1 billion business. Things are going to slip through the cracks. Yeah.
Yeah. And he's hands-on in every aspect of it. And, I'd like to think that everybody that was working under him might not have been as diligent as I love working under him in that regard. I didn't like getting produced by him. I've said that before. It's no big deal. He probably at the end of the day made me a better broadcaster for that standpoint. But that was our job. Same thing when I worked for Cowboy. Cowboy would forget something, and he's only writing an hour TV show a week. Look at how much productivity Vince is doing. And so he would forget things, and he'd put him with that yellow legal pad, and if he didn't go back and look at it, he might forget. So, but that's kind of how I saw that. It was just, interesting. It was an interesting way that we all worked together. He had a great team at that point in time. And, guys, we talked about before on the air about how many people we lost this year.
Yeah.
Patterson was invaluable. Because Patterson by and large, kept the fundamental side that in the water.
Mm-hmm.
And he would bring Vince back to reality sometimes when Vince would want to go down a road that was more creative and off the wall and different. I think that's why the Attitude Era clicked so much, because Vince was able to play with a new toy, new presentation. And I said this before, and the ratings kind of prove it out. He was the best heel we had. Even though Triple H was getting those great ratings, and he was a great heel, no doubt, Hall of Fame level. The perfect heel for Stone Cold was Vince McMahon.
Right.
We didn't have a heel that worked and performed better with Vince or with Steve than Vince. So that package just kind of came together. So that's kind of where we were. And that's why we talked about Shawn earlier. We knew that Shawn was going to add to the team. It's like if, we were talking off the air about this wide receiver that Alabama, that was their best wide receiver, Waddle.
Yep.
And he got hurt early in the year, out for the year.
Yep.
So if there was a chance to get him back before the end of the season, every Alabama fan would be looking forward to it because they know he's a player.
Of course.
He may be the best wide receiver in the whole goddamn game until this new cat they got.
He did okay.
So, but you know what I'm saying? You look at that, you anticipate. And that's the thing I've said on the show a lot, is the fact that, anticipation is great for wrestling. That's why I believe if you're a booker and the farther out you can book and announce a match to start building the anticipation for that match, it makes that match be perceived as being bigger and better than maybe it actually is. So, that was what we were looking for with Shawn. So it was just was a great era there. That was a great era. And I think you hit the nail on the head, that this Rumble kind of represented everything that we're trying to put together with all these new talents and giving guys an opportunity to run with the ball, get your touches. And we did that. But the bottom line is that the talents themselves delivered. And that's always the end story.
Hey, question I want to follow up with there is you were talking about, hey, we didn't have a heel who worked better with Steve than Vince. Does there get to be like a tipping point where it's like, okay, this is great storytelling, but are we almost hurting some of the other heel talent and maybe keeping them from having a shot at being our best heel if Vince is on TV and isn't really going to be on the house shows and can't really wrestle the matches? And I know that Vince did some stuff here and there, but was that ever a concern internally that, man, are we putting too much stock in Vince? Don't we need to make one of the boys? And obviously you tried to do that with Triple H and The Rock, but to your point, I think fans still look back and they say, man, nobody was a better heel for him, than Vince. But then of course it does become the rivalry with him and Rock that sort of bubbles to the surface. Was that always apparent, or was it a concerted effort to say, all right, we've done a great job telling a story here, but we've got to push a guy as our top heel somehow?
Well, we knew we were going to push, we had to deliver in the ring, which Vince did on the special occasion. I thought much more, I was leery of those matches when we first were talking about having them, because Vince had no extensive training
Right.
in that regard. But what we have to remember is that, Vince was a great mouthpiece. Vince did great promos. Vince had a unique perspective because he was the owner of the company, and that made that heel character different than anything else we had. So all we were really doing, Conrad, was giving Austin that great rub and getting Austin ready as a babyface for other heels.
Right.
So that when Triple H finally got his shot at Austin was quite hot. And whomever else came after that, any other heel. So no, I don't think it was a big issue. I just think that, once we saw how hot it was, look, the quarter hour ratings dictated a lot of things in that era. When we started getting quarter hour ratings in minute by minutes, all those things are huge in the booking because it was
feedback,
legitimate data,
right? That
you could hang your hat on. So, but I don't think so. I can see your point, and it's a good point. But I think all we were doing was heating Austin up, because remember when Austin and McMahon had their issues and they would Austin move on to the next deal, oftentimes Vince was still involved. And so we kept that heat, that relationship alive there. So I understand your point, and it's a good point. But in this case, it was so unique that the owner of the company being the top heel, and he didn't anoint himself as a top heel. This is me saying, I believe that every segment was better that had Vince in it when he was Mr. McMahon.
Yeah, no doubt about that. Let's talk about the show itself. Let's jump into the feedback from the fans who read the Wrestling Observer. 97.2% thumbs up, only 2.1% thumbs down, 0.8% thumbs in the middle. Really, what a remarkable, report from the fans when it's 97% thumbs up. 97% of us can't agree on what to do for breakfast. So there's, right. I mean, my goodness.
I don't want those goddamn scrambled eggs again, Conrad. Son of a bitch. Fucking scrambled eggs. Is that all you're thinking about? Scrambled eggs?
The best match poll, it's nearly as unanimous. It's Benoit and Jericho, 348 votes there. Angle and Triple H got 29 votes. The Rumble only got 13 votes for best match. Worst match, it's almost as unanimous. Ivory and Chyna get 312. There's one match on Sunday Night Heat. It's Lowdown, taking on Kai and Tai. It's a very quick match, under 2 minutes, a minute 57. Lowdown gets the win with a double team power bomb on Chaz. Double team power bomb with Chaz pinning Funaki. And it's announced that the winning team will have one member get a chance to enter the Rumble. But later in the show, McMahon gives that slot to Drew Carey, which is what it is. First, Drew Carey's in the Hall of Fame and Eric Bischoff is not. That's a story for another day. Tell me about Lowdown. You've got two talented performers here. Of course, One of the favorites here on the show, D'Lo Brown, who did a great job in the Nation of Domination and became a star. And then one half of the Headbangers that you tried a few things with, Chaz. Chat me up here. What do you remember about Lowdown and how this came to be? Because in hindsight, it seems like it had a ton of potential because you got two talented performers, but when you put them together, maybe not so much.
Well, you put them together and maybe not so much as the reason is all dictated back to creative.
Right.
They had no momentum. You can't, that's what I said this, I got a lot of feedback from the website, wrestling websites who'd like to use this program with you and I as clickbait. You can't have 50-50 booking. You can't get somebody over that has no momentum. You can't. It will not happen. So then you have to justify, well, do we have Lowdown get 6, 8, 10 wins in a row? Well, we can't do that. They're underneath guys. They're prelim guys. They are the way you book them.
Right.
If you want to give them a chance, two good citizens, two good guys in the locker room, two hardworking guys, as you pointed out, Conrad, two very fundamentally sound storytellers. We never knew that because those of us that followed them and liked them, I signed both those guys. I liked both those guys, but they didn't get the opportunity to play in the game. And that was their issue. It's just that there weren't enough people in the decision-making area that had the confidence of D'Lo and Chaz that you and I are talking about now. That's all that was.
It's interesting too, that not too long after they're put together, they put them with Tiger Ali Singh as their manager. Tiger Ali Singh feels like a name that I didn't even really remember being a part of the company in 2001. He'd been around for 4 or 5 years at that point and just never really materialized into the star that maybe people thought he was going to be coming in, but they start dressing like him too. And for lack of a better word, dressing these guys up in their pajamas or these genie outfits with, it just didn't fit at all. But they're wrestling a comedy team here who were very talented performers in their own right. Kai and Tai and Funaki, boy, he became a staple with you guys for a long, long time.
Yeah. I think he's still on the broadcast group for the Asian markets, Japan and so forth. Well, Tiger Ali Singh we kind of took a flyer on that deal.
Right.
We thought that in the global expansion that we were embarking on in a country like India, his natural heritage, and the fact that his father had such a strong reputation in a lot of outside the United States areas, that we could parlay that. We gave him the name, and I think his dad had a lot to do with the name, that we gave the Ali was added. And, Tiger Jeet Singh was a famous guy.
Right.
To old school wrestling fans. So Tiger Ali Singh, a very common name in India. Tiger, marketable. And the Ali was after, of course, Muhammad. So we thought we could parlay his heritage, quite frankly, into something that was marketable. I remember he lived in Toronto, right? So we didn't fly him first class, except on the last leg of his flights getting into Toronto. So that when he came off the plane, travelers and staff and et cetera could see him exiting the plane as one of the first guys, indicating that he was a first class flyer. Hey, as crazy as it sounds, the good news is that if he had lived in a city that was a hub for a lot of other talent, I would probably had a mutiny on my hands. Because Tiger Ali Singh, he looked great heritage, but he wasn't really over with the boys. Of course, then you go back and say, if you're a Tiger Ali aficionado, you say, well, the guys are jealous.
Right.
Okay, so some probably were. But I've never had another travel issue that way. He flew coach except the last leg getting into Toronto.
Was that
and all that was for show purposes.
Was that a Vince edict or does he request that?
No, it was discussed, like any other traveler, he wants to fly first class the whole loops.
Of course.
And, if he's flying from Des Moines to Chicago or Chicago to wherever, he's in coach. But that last leg going in Toronto, he flew first. So I guess he could get off the plane early. But that was something that Vince and I worked out basically with his father. And his dad, you know, you can make an argument that okay, I get it.
Yeah, perception.
But first class signifies success, I suppose.
Mm-hmm.
So in any event, that's kind of what we'll deal with him. So we took a flyer on him thinking that he could be our biggest star in India and other countries that would appeal to his ethnicity. And it never did work out.
Let's talk about the next match. Oh, before we do though, Funaki, what was your relationship like with him?
Good. Nice guy. You didn't get a peep out of him.
I just assumed that was the case because he's been there, as you said, forever.
Yeah. And he's very well liked. He's very polite, very professional. You know, I couldn't evaluate his announcing because I can't speak Japanese. I can barely speak English, as we all know. I had somebody on Twitter said that one of the greatest battles they ever saw was JR in the English language. So I guess that's where I am with that deal. But he's a sweetheart of a guy. He lives in San Antonio. He's a Green Bay Packer fan. He's become Americanized, man. So I can see him right now eating fajitas and watching the Packers. That's about as diverse as she could get. So he's a good guy, a good dude, and a very talented kid. I don't know if he's a kid anymore, but he got it quick. He adapted very quickly, and he really loved the privilege of living in America. And I got a lot of time for guys like that.
Let's get to the next match. It's our first one on the pay-per-view. The Dudley Boys win the tag titles from Edge and Christian in 9 minutes and 59 seconds. Meltzer would note they changed the name of Christian's finishing maneuver, the former Tamakaze, which they had been calling the Impaler. Now it's the Unprettier. He thinks it's after the TLC song. This is a pretty good match, 2.25 stars. Of course, finally they hit the 3D and Bubba pins Edge to take the titles. We talk a lot about Edge and Christian these days because, you know, Edge has got the big spot with WWE. Of course, he's been on the shelf with an injury, and he and Christian did a podcast and did a show on the network. And behind the scenes these days, of course, Devon is a big contributor to the company, and you can hear Bubba on Busted Open Radio on Sirius XM on the Fight Nation station. Of course, everybody knows about Busted Open, but I don't think that maybe younger fans really can appreciate how over the Dudley Boys were. And I know that, you know, guys like Bruce are sort of dismissive and say, oh, there's an ECW tag team and blah, blah, blah. But dude, they got over silly stuff. Like, not only was the 3D over as a great devastating maneuver and Devon get the tables, but the whole what's up thing, which is a spoof of a Super Bowl commercial, became a big spot that fans really looked forward to. Right.
Yeah. Yeah. And they would chime in and sing along, so to speak. I think anytime you get fans that remember your little
catchphrases
or whatever, their phrases, you know, you're traveling the right road there. So yeah, hey, Devon and Bubba were they were hard-working son of a bitches. You couldn't see through their shit. They were intense and physical, but they had enough touches of entertainment to balance out their brutality. But you know, I'm the ECW thing. Hey, it's the revisionist history on ECW is sometimes laughable. But take nothing away from guys like Devon and Bubba who delivered the goods. They made a lot of money in WWE. I would suggest to you that they got set up financially in a big, big way from their excursions in WWE. I know that, you know, Bubba finally went eventually to Impact and TNA at the time, I guess, and Devon, but they set their foundation up as top guys. And they did that a lot with working with Edge and Christian and the Hardys and these TLC matches and things of that nature. They made that to an art form. So I don't really, I get sometimes I think it's a chuckle when I hear guys talking about ECW and all these glowing terms that they revolutionized wrestling and they changed the game forever and all that stuff. I don't know that to be accurate, but if that's what they believe, then what does it bother me? I don't care. All I wanted to make sure they came to work on time. They busted their ass. They did it every damn night. They worked hard. They both got good wrestling minds. You know, we had a couple of Devon's twin boys have been doing some dark matches for AEW.
Mm-hmm.
I think this year, a while back, they had a match with the Billy Gunn's two sons. That was kind of fun to watch.
Yeah, the New Age Outlaws and the Dudleys all over again.
Yeah, so it was kind of cool. So, but they were big time players for us. Nobody should ever discount how important the Dudleys were to our success in the Attitude Era, because they contributed mightily, and it was because of their consistency. They rarely got out of their lane, Conrad. They knew what they did well, and so they did that. You know, I use this analogy a lot. I tell these kids, I told one of our guys this the other night, I said, you know, you need to work on your punches, because you got in too big a hurry, and the execution of some of your punches was lacking. And the punches early in the match, when you were measuring it, and you know you were doing your thing, they were beautiful. But you got in a hurry, and so the punches became a work. It looked like a work, and so they just, you know, they always brought it, man. So I always, and then we got Edge. They were working with Edge and Christian.
Yep.
Who were coming into their own.
Big time.
Yeah. So, you know, this roster, as you and I were talking before we started recording, it's pretty amazing to look at this roster and see all the stars, star power on it. It's extraordinary. And when you see it all on the card, it's all lined up. It's frightening how good it was.
Meltzer would say the first segment with Drew Carey, where the storyline was that since Carey was doing a pay-per-view, he wanted to meet Vince for tips on how to do a pay-per-view, and ended up in Trish's dressing room, where Vince talked about him entering the Rumble. At first, they tried to push that Carey was a big wrestling fan, but they had to change the idea since he was naive to what the Rumble was and thought wrestling was all in fun and nobody got hurt. What are your memories of Drew Carey that night and his involvement with the company?
He probably had his less impact from a guest star as anybody I can recall off the top of my head. He was hot on television. I don't know if that's when he was doing The Price is Right or not. I don't remember, but he was getting a lot of media stretch. And the reason Drew Carey was on this card was to get outside pro wrestling media exposure, i.e. the TMZs of the world, et cetera, et cetera. So, but he wasn't a fan. And so maybe he was just the biggest star that was available. I don't know. I wasn't in that area, never got involved in it. But he was a nice guy, but I don't think he really knew why he was there other than to payday and to promote whatever he was promoting. And I don't remember what he was even promoting at that point in time. He didn't have a big impact, Conrad, on what we were doing, but to say he was aloof or didn't want to participate would be erroneous.
This is
a nice guy.
Just so you know, it's pre-Price is Right. He does have the Drew Carey show, and he had just started Whose Line Is It Anyway, which was doing really well. So he's had some TV success, but that doesn't necessarily mean that any wrestling fan gives a shit.
Right.
Our next match, though, you are going to give a shit about, especially if you're a wrestling fan. It's two WCW stars. Their feud actually started back at WrestleMania 2000 when Benoit and Jericho challenged Kurt Angle for both his Intercontinental title and the European Championship. It was a 2-fall triple threat match. During the match, both men pinned each other, so Kurt Angle managed to lose both belts without being pinned. Since that event, Benoit would hold 3 pay-per-view victories over Jericho, SummerSlam being the standout, I guess. It was a 2 out of 3 falls match. On the January 4th episode of SmackDown, Benoit would defend his title against Jericho in a regular match. And of course, during the match, Saturn and Malenko, who were Benoit's partners in the Radicals, would interfere and attack Jericho, which caused him to win the match by DQ, but not the championship. On the January 8th episode of Raw, Jericho's going to team with the Hardy Boys against the Radicals in a 6-man tag. And here we would see Jericho pick up a victory over Benoit. And as we march towards WrestleMania, or Royal Rumble rather, on the January 11th episode of SmackDown, Jericho demands a title match here at the Rumble. And Benoit says he'll give him any type of match he wants. And Jericho chooses a ladder match. So here we have a ladder match now with Jericho and Benoit. It's the match of the night, according to the readers of the Observer. Dave loved it too. He gave it 4 3/4 stars. They get plenty of time, 18 minutes and 44 seconds. Meltzer would point out they started with a lot of great mat wrestling before any ladder involvement. But once they got going, man, they did some really innovative stuff. There's like a tarantula like move on top of the ladder. It was really just incredible. I know a lot of our listeners have a hard time going back and watching Benoit matches, but this is about as good of a ladder match as you can put together. Wouldn't you agree?
Yeah, it was fun to call, fun to watch. Two great performers that took a lot of pride in what they did in the ring, what they do for a living. Both deserve the opportunity. Two sub 6 footers of Canadian descent that got to come, they got to get to go to the big dances. And
Yeah.
I was very proud of both those guys. And like I said, we've told this before that, they neither were easy hires because of their height, perceived deficiency of not being, tall enough. People wouldn't believe and all that stuff, but their work was extraordinary. I was proud of both those guys. It was the best match of the card, without a doubt.
So again, if you're comfortable watching Benoit matches, and I get it if you're not, this is one to go out of your way to see. One of the better ladder matches, almost a forgotten ladder match because of everything that happened with Benoit. But my goodness, they're pulling out all the stops here, big chair shots, crazy innovative ladder spots. And ultimately when Benoit's climbing, Jericho shoves the ladder, Benoit goes over the top, and that gives time to, let Jericho run up and grab the title belt. Jericho's your winner and your new Intercontinental Championship holder. Next up, Ivory and Chyna for the women's title. This was the worst match on the card, according to the readers.
The readers are right on this one.
3 minutes, 32 seconds. Not very good. And there's a bad spot here. Meltzer's very critical of. Chyna basically mopped the floor with Ivory and Steven Richards and set up the handspring elbow spot, which she mistimed. She then collapsed, and they sold it as if it was a paralysis angle, noting that her arm never moved, and Ivory quickly pinned her. It got really tasteless from here because in order to sell it as legit, Jim Ross went into the same tone of voice and Jerry Lawler hit the ring to check on her, identical to the Owen Hart death. Yeah. It was far too similar for that not to be the marching orders to use what everyone knew was legit to get this angle over, because people don't believe these angles anymore. They never mentioned the famous injuries like to Darren Drozdov and Austin, and this was something like a takeoff of, but WCW never mentioned Owen Hart when they had the EMTs feverishly working on Canyon after taking the bump in the Kemper Arena. Chyna ended up being put in a cervical collar and stretchered out. The working during the match itself was a lot better than most of the WWF women's fare. Half a star. We just recently covered Chyna, but this moment in particular was not exactly a highlight. It's not her fault. I'm sure this was the creative, but when you're asked to essentially recreate what you did for Owen for a bullshit wrestling angle, that had to be pretty difficult.
Hard to sell. Didn't agree with that philosophically whatsoever. You said it wasn't Chyna's fault. Part of the situation was Chyna's fault, Conrad.
Okay.
She didn't want to wrestle Ivory. She didn't wrestle any of her gender. And so I don't know that we got the greatest effort out of Chyna. She could call part of it in and still be better than a lot because her size or, strength, et cetera, et cetera. But she went into the match with a negative feeling that it was beneath her.
Right.
She had won she beat Jeff Jarrett and other guys, the Intercontinental Champion. To which I say, who everybody beat Jeff Jarrett at one point in time.
Right.
And I thought it shit all over the Intercontinental title. Because again, I'm not a fan of intergender wrestling,
right?
Which people can take any way they want. That doesn't mean you don't have to like it. You can like it if you want to. You can watch every intergender match known to God. Have at it. It's just not my cup of tea. So I don't like anchovies either, by the way. So if you buy me a pizza, don't put any anchovies in it, on it. That's just a bullshit deal. But anyway, I think that her attitude going into the match was negative. The creative didn't help anything. It was all done to protect Joni. We all got to protect Joni. And Joni should have been a good enough worker to know how to lose slipping on the proverbial banana peel or whatever it may have been to get out of there with something more tasteful as the finish was concerned. So her motivation for not wanting to wrestle women was a negative. Her demands on finishes and what she wanted or she would or wouldn't do, and we had to protect Joni, was daunting to come up with the right creative. And whose ever idea this was, it sucked pond water. I mean, honestly, anytime you do a finish that harkens back to a tragedy, it's wrong. Same theory of using religion or politics in a wrestling show.
Yeah.
It's wrong. You can't gift wrap it. You can't make it look nice. It's still, when you unwrap the package, it's going to smell like shit. And that whole thing was that way. And the sad part about it is that the person we haven't even mentioned was Ivory.
Yeah. Capable.
Very capable and a hell of a hand. And I now that somebody says that JR saying somebody's a hell of a hand is a kiss of death. I guess it is for some people.
Who said that?
Well, I said that Brian Pillman Jr., I had a picture taken with him on New Year's Eve, and I said, this kid's evolving to a hell of a hand. And I'm glad he's in AEW. And we both miss his dad.
Right.
Somebody took exception to that. Well, he's been, Pillman Jr.'s now been earmarked as a hell of a hand. And anybody JR said that about is, they become less than.
And I'm sure whoever said that, has booked a lot of territories and sold a lot of pay-per-views.
Yeah. So anyway, again, I know Joni probably did not come up with a finish. I bet money she did not.
Right.
But I'm sure she endorsed it because it gave her a prominent out that the only reason that Ivory won was due to the injury. And I know, I can remember how I was produced. Lower your tone. Lower your tone.
Okay. So that wasn't said. This is what I was going to get to. And I'm glad you went right into that. Did you know the creative was, hey, maybe they didn't say it explicitly, but when you're given that, hey, here's what we're doing, or did you even know, or is it happening live? No,
I knew that the finish was going to be a little bit, left-handed, for lack of a better term.
Sure.
But Vince specifically in my ear was making sure I sold it in the way that I just described, lower your tones. It's very serious. It's like that commercial on TV that says, we all see it. We all see it. The guy remember that you got that, I'm watching too much fucking television.
Well, that's
what you do when you spend a lot of time by yourself.
I was going to say, there's not much to do.
Yeah. So anyway, but I remember Vince, and now that we talk about it, I remember him producing me that way. That's what he wanted. And that's what I gave him. So here's the thing. Somebody's going to be out there thinking, well, I wouldn't have done it.
Yeah.
Fuck that. I wouldn't have done it. Bullshit.
Yeah.
You mean you don't do everything your boss tells you? Or you must be out of work then, right? You're unemployed. Join the ranks. It's stupid. So anyhow, I remember that. I didn't like the finish. I didn't like the memories it conjured up again. It was no win. And why do we do it, Conrad? To protect Joni. You had to keep Joni happy.
You've had a lot of personal time with Vince, just one-on-one. After you do this, and you're doing what you're asked, when next time you have some sort of private time with Vince, do you bring this up and say, Vince, is that the right call?
Well, we talked about things like that. He wanted that.
Yeah.
I said it before, to communicate with Vince McMahon, you need to converse, not confront.
Mm-hmm.
I would not have those conversations. And the same thing held true when I worked for Cowboy. In private, you can say about anything you want to say, in any tone you want to say it, in any language you want to utilize. So we would reassess things all the time. That was part of our teamwork.
Right.
Is that we did have a lot of conferences, and talked a lot and exchanged ideas. When we were riding in a car, sometimes we'd ride together before all the limos and all that stuff came about. And he loved to drive. He loved to brag about his depth perception. We're going 80. Someday I'll tell you the story about when he got stopped by the little skinny cop in Ohio that said, I guess I'm the big boss man. Cause Vince was in and out of the construction cones like he was in the Joey Chitwood Thrill Show. And my ass is tighter than, not closer to 19 is to 20. And he said, don't worry, JR, I got great depth perception. As I tightened my seatbelt a little tighter. But we talked about a lot of that stuff. And my general thing would be, instead of going to a wrestler promo, it would be, I think we could have done better on that finish.
Right.
Because here's what it reminded me of sitting there as a broadcaster. And I don't perceive those memories as positive. I don't know that we really did help Joni, but we did try to protect her. I think the negative taste, as you mentioned earlier, was right spot on. We could have done better. We could have done better. And that's probably what I told him. And he may agree. He may say, well, in hindsight, you might be right. Meaning I was right.
Right.
Or he may say, well, I still think it's going to work. Okay. So whatever. But you address it, you converse it, you don't confront, you converse and you move on. Make your point. He liked that. He loved that. But he didn't like it with 3 people in the car. He liked it just you and him. And I got no problem with that.
So I'm curious, do you think, and boy, we're going to get a little shit for me even asking this, but do you think we should maybe give him the benefit of the doubt? I know we as fans watching at home automatically jump to, oh, this is like the Owen Hart thing. But by this point, that was a few years ago. Vince has booked a million things. He's trying to sell it as real. Do you think he even drew the correlation to the Owen Hart thing until you mentioned it to him?
I don't know. He might not have.
Right.
Because again, and you mentioned this earlier, he's running a $1 billion company.
Yeah.
And he's hands-on and from everything from t-shirt designs to, a talent's attire. So he's involved in everything. So I think that, it may have slipped past him. And I'm sure some people are thinking, well, how could that ever happen?
Yeah.
How could you forget that? Well, many of you are listening, including, and then me. I had a pretty busy schedule there, but nobody worked as hard as McMahon.
Right.
And as he still does. He works at 75. It's like he did when he was 25.
And we should mention too, we're not saying that Owen wasn't significant or important or any of that. I just wondered, is it something where he just maybe, it was a blind spot for him,
I'm sorry. He may have that may have been a match in the guise of protecting Joni, where they're trying to come up with an idea that would be plausible and might be workable. And that might've been the best thing that they came up with. I don't know. But when you give all these, when you got all these, so I don't want to say stipulations, when all these little caveats have to be addressed of protecting somebody. The old school way of looking at that was you're getting paid big money. You should know how to lose as well as you know how to win. And that's not always the case. Talents have got to become unselfish. They got to look for a way to, like I said, slip on that proverbial banana peel that leads to their loss. And then count on the announcers to make sure that we tell the story and protect them. And Lawler and I would have been happy. We did that all the time. So I don't know. Maybe it's just one of those deals where it was a match on the card. It didn't mean a lot. But I think that 2 things out of it, we went too far in trying to protect Joni instead of doing it within the confines of the match, holes, missed opportunities, mistakes, things of that nature. We go this other route. And I also think the other negative of this whole conversation about this match is the fact that Lisa Moretti doesn't get the credit that she deserves for going through the shit that she had to go through to take care of Joni. And because here's a veteran, skilled, talking about Lisa, Ivory, and she was a big asset for us in that Attitude Era, without a doubt, because she could wrestle. She could work, and she was so unselfish, she didn't mind helping the other girls. And so that was, I just think that sometimes she gets overlooked in this equation regarding this match, which wasn't a good match, as we pointed out. So, but I think it's all about when you got to stop the presses to come up with a reason that's not right in front of you to protect a talent, you may have booked the wrong piece of business or had the wrong philosophy on it. There's no reason that certainly that there could have been a better. Here's what I'd have done, and I may be wrong about this. I'd have given that match to Patterson, and I'd have said, Pat, come up with a finish that protects Joni a little bit, and so we got an out that the announcers can tell the story. But I don't know that Patterson put that match together.
Next up, we should mention it's time for our world title match. We've got our defending champion Kurt Angle and challenger Triple H. The build-up for this match started on January 8th on Raw is War, when Angle defended the title against Stone Cold Steve Austin, which ended in a no contest because Triple H interfered and ambushed Austin with a steel pipe. On the January 11th episode of SmackDown, Vince McMahon scheduled to defend his title at the Royal Rumble against Triple H. And leading up to the event, both men spoke about the match, with Triple H claiming that Angle only held the championship because he allowed him to. And here we are. Kurt Angle picks up the win. He retains in 24-15. Meltzer would write, although Triple H had more cheers than Angle, fans overall didn't seem to know how to react as it was quiet because they were going so long. They did long building spots, mainly based around Triple H working Angle's left leg. Eventually, we see, Trish Stratus start to jump in and alert the ref. Stephanie starts attacking Stratus. They're brawling, rolling all over the Spanish announce table. Vince comes out to separate them, but he can't break them up. And at one point, Vince puts Trish on his shoulders and is carrying her away, but Stephanie attacks Trish and Vince takes a bump underneath. And Meltzer would even say all three did a really good job, even with this segment taking several minutes. Eventually we get back to action, and referee Earl Hebner takes a bump. Triple H smashes Angle's head into the steps, and Hebner got caught in there and takes a second bump. Triple H grabs the belt from Mark Eaton, who's at ringside. Before he can use it, Angle gives him a belly to belly. Triple H comes back with a pedigree after blocking the belt shot, but once again, there's no referee. So out comes Steve Austin. He attacks Triple H, nails him with the belt. And of course, Triple H is busted wide open. Angle still selling the pedigree, stronger than the belt shot. So Austin hits Triple H with a stunner and leaves. Angle gets the arm over him, and there's your pin. 3 3/4 stars. You got two very capable in-ring performers here, but lots of, as Pat would say, gaga. What'd you think?
Well, Triple H had to have an out. That whole philosophy of giving. See, I don't understand what the big issue is of somebody winning, with people winning and losing.
Right.
We've conditioned ourselves to dialogue like we have on this show, other wrestling news websites, news sites, because everybody wants to make a big deal. Well, he beat him in the middle. So what's your fucking point? Oh, he beat him in the middle, Conrad. They're killing him.
Huh.
They beat him in the middle. God, he beat him with his finish. What's up with that? How can that be? Well, it can be because it's logical. And now everybody's got to have an out. They got to miss the, the big bump over, whatever, over the top, or they got something off the top rope. They miss it. Everybody's got to have something that they crash and burn before they can lose. Instead of getting into a wrestling environment and having a very competitive matchup with counters and storytelling and logic, and then anybody should be able to lose to another top guy's finish. Finishes are that's what they're for. And so everybody's got to have, the Austin thing here. Well, Austin was coming back, and Austin was going to add star power to this whole thing, and he did. The buy rates indicate that. But there's another situation where, and it wasn't because it was Triple H, it was because that was the theory then, the philosophy, and it is still today to a large degree. People can't lose unless there's some external reason.
Right.
They can't lose because they made a mistake, a human error. The guy's better on this night than another guy. I firmly believe in my heart that I can take care of anybody doing the honors to where they leave that match with their dignity intact and all that good stuff because they got caught in the other guy's finish. Simple. You see it in MMA all the time. Right. That's real. Well, what we do is supposed to simulate realness. You get somebody in a rear naked choke and they got it locked in MMA and the UFC or something. The other guy's going to tap. And that's the same theory back in the day when I first started. No baby faces ever lost by submission to any degree. It was a sign of weakness. You got to protect me, brother. And then when wrestlers started becoming bookers, that whole thing manifested itself. When businessmen like Bosch and Muchnick, McGurk, and McGurk was, of course, a former wrestler, and so was Bosch. Muchnick was not. When they were booking and calling their own shots, and the wrestlers themselves were not involved in the decision making, the finishes were a lot cleaner, a lot more pointed, more right in your face. And and now we've gotten away from that to a large degree. So if you say, well, so and so is going to do this, well, how do we work that out? Well, we'll have interference or whatever. That's a bad trend for our business, that everybody's always got to miss something big to lose, and then oftentimes you don't even lose the other guy's finish. So anyway, I'm a big believer that if you're a good enough worker, I mentioned this in the Joni piece of business earlier, you should be a good enough worker to strategize yourself into getting into a predicament that for 3 seconds you couldn't get out of. And I think that's what we are here. We want to protect Triple H. He was a great investment, but Triple H losing to an ankle lock, or Triple H losing in a hell of a spirited match, Conrad, with the angle slam, that don't bother me. And I don't think it'd bother the audience.
Right.
But that's where we are right now with a lot of pro wrestling. But that match there was one to get Austin in that title picture. Austin getting back on the TV in a positive light. I thought it hurt his entry into the Rumble. I didn't need to see Austin in that match.
Right.
If I was looking back at it and going back in time, and I was booking that match, handling the creative on it, I'm not sure exactly what I would have done. But if you want Triple H to lose, there's a way to work that out very easily. But I didn't need to see Austin. Save him for his entrance into the Rumble. Don't spoil his pop with a cameo in the title match.
We should mention Meltzer really liked this match. He says Triple H, no doubt studying old tapes, pulled out numerous methods of working the leg and old Ric Flair spots, and the two worked a very different style match for both of them and pulled it off tremendously. So he's very complimentary, but he does, sort of pick apart the creative, especially with the interference and, well, the fact that both of these guys are technically heels. And even though Angle had sort of been pushed as the face, the crowd is still cheering Triple H a little more. But he really thought that the guys inside the ring did a great job. Let's get to the Royal Rumble match. Meltzer would say this was better than most Rumbles, but nowhere close to being the best. He said it had a lot of slow moments, but early it had a very good finish. The entrances were supposed to be 2 minutes apart, but there was really no set time. The first 6 were about 1:45, and then there were 2 minutes for some, 1:45 for others, but somewhere mostly in the middle. This is something Meltzer's had a lot of fun with over the years. I think he used to call it Titan time. In the scheme of things, do you think that's that big a deal? Should we give a shit if it's 2 minutes or not?
Yeah, I think so. If you're not, don't advertise it.
Right. There you go.
If it don't make a shit, then don't talk about it. But if you're going to say in your pre-event build-up that this is what's going to happen, then deliver what you promise is going to happen.
Right.
So yes, it's a big deal if it's promoted that way.
Of course, it opens up with Jeff Hardy and Bull Buchanan. Matt Hardy's going to come in third, and they do some double team spots. It's a pretty fun little match. There is a moment where Drew Carey gets in. Kane's going to grab him for a choke slam, but Raven hits him with a kendo stick, and Carey just simply climbs over the top and leaves in 9 minutes and 7 seconds. Meltzer would say this was pretty lame because there was no payoff. Granted, it was better than WCW's usage of David Arquette and Jay Leno going over stars, but at least Pete Rose took his annual one bump. What do you think of the way they used Carey here? It was like, I don't know, a bit of a waste of time.
Lukewarm. like I said, he was a nice guy while he was there. I mean, he spoke to a lot of people, and chatted, took pictures, was a very friendly celebrity, but it just didn't connect, as I thought it should have. So I wasn't real high on the execution of Drew Perry and Drew Carey, in the match. But they got him in and out. He wasn't there for how many seconds?
Yeah, not long at all.
He got in, he got out. So at least that was painless. But again, it's hard to pan these guys because you meet them before the show. They're hanging around the other guys and gals, smiling. I know Drew was kind of a ladies' man, so we had a lot of ladies there that were easy to look at, shall we say, to be polite.
Sure.
And a lot of sex appeal. So he seemed like he had fun, but he didn't. I don't know that he knew why he was there. To promote his products, let us promote his products, but he didn't understand the very, very basics of wrestling. So, and I'm not talking about how to apply a side headlock to take somebody down. Let's talk about the intellectual concepts of heel, baby face. He probably never seen a Royal Rumble match in his life, et cetera, et cetera. And maybe that's the fault of the company for not giving him more of a background. But in any event, I thought it was lukewarm. But the thing that made it palatable for me was not his performance in the ring, which I guess is what I should be judging, that he was a very nice guy.
Let's talk about some other things here in the match. We've got a fire extinguisher being used by Raven. We've got garbage can lid spots. We've got Blackman coming in and using his sticks. This is sort of weird to see all these weapons in a Royal Rumble match. Did you like that or not so much?
No, not really. You save it. It was just too indiscriminate and it's shortcuts.
Right.
Shortcuts. Well, Raven's going to use this because he was the ECW. EC dub. What the fuck? Who cares?
Right.
They're out of business. He's actually getting paid on time now. So what? Stop it. It was a great time. It's like me talking endlessly about Mid-South.
Right.
I'd like to. It was a great gig. Didn't make a lot of money, but I sure as hell learned a lot. Got me where I am today. But I don't know, man. And I'm sounding like I'm down on ECW. I'm not at all. Goddamn, I hired a lot of their guys. But I can tell you that from my experience, working with many, not all, but many of the ECW guys that I hired, for whatever reason, they came out of that environment, many of them untrusting and half-assed paranoid about every decision made. And that may have been simply a facet of the leadership there. Paul's a young manager. Paul, he's high strung, and Paul knew what to say at the right time to get past that moment. Where's our checks? Well, you never believe what happened. That damn Conrad came over, put it between two pieces of bread, and thought it was whatever. Or my dog ate it or some shit. But that's. Yeah, I didn't think it was needed. It just gave the guys who are in these matches for a short time, in their mind's eye, an identifier. Hey, I remember that one time that Rumble where old Raven used the kendo stick, or this guy used a trash can lid. Well, they want something to be remembered by, and I think they choose the wrong thing. But again, did it offend me to the point that where it turned me off the match? Not really. I just thought that it was overkill and overcompensation.
We get another surprise here. The Honky Tonk Man. He's 47 years old. He's in the match here as a surprise. Meltzer would write, some of the fans in the first few rows popped for his great easy for me to say, his greatest IC champ of all time routine. But the reality is his heyday was 87, 88. And the long shot showed mostly very confused fans as to who this old guy dressed like Elvis with a guitar was. Anyway, it was entertaining for those who knew. Kane clocked him with the guitar and threw him out at 1953. So he still lasted longer than some of the contracted guys. One of my favorite parts of the Rumble is you never know who's going to show up, and these little surprises, even if you know they're not going to win, it's a fun little moment. And I liked this one with Honky Tonk Man. What'd you think?
Pure nostalgia.
Yeah.
Well, some of the fans didn't know who he was. No shit, Dave. No kidding. Same thing as Strangler Lewis had gotten a goddamn match. Who's that old fat guy that's bald, that's got no sight? Well, that's Strangler Lewis. Yeah? Tell me about him. Well, I don't know anything about him. So that's, I thought it's strictly nostalgia, man. That's all. And Honky added a little, like you said, if you knew who he was,
right,
then it was kind of fun to see him again in this environment. He wasn't, he wasn't going to win. He wasn't going to stand there long. He got there. I remember talking to him about that and discussing his pay before he ever came. I said, I'll pay you at least this minimum. And if the show does well, then you hopefully can make more. But you know that when you leave home to come to New Orleans, you're going to get paid at the bottom is this. And it was a good bottom, it's a good number. And it's certainly more than he was making in his other bookings by and large. And it got him back on a national platform. So, but it's just nostalgia. It wasn't made to be something that was insignificant. It's just a little, it was like it wasn't the entree. It was a very tasty, well-established side dish. And I thought it worked out just fine. It's for what it was supposed to be. And it delivered that.
We also see Big Show here. Meltzer would write, show looked almost as heavy as in his WCW days. So WWF really has a problem right now. They made it public that they weren't going to use him until they got to 400, and he kept getting word that weight was coming off. Don't know what happened, but he showed up as big as when he left, and either they're going to look bad taking him back after he didn't get the weight off, making them look like WCW management, or he made some very bad decisions that are going to negatively affect a once promising career. This is something you've talked about a little bit on the show before, but you were certainly very transparent about it on the Ross Report back in the day. When you see him show up here and he's not exactly in fighting shape, are you disappointed?
Yeah. And here's why I'm disappointed, Conrad. I thought his weight and his obesity was going to shorten his life.
Right.
It wasn't about, well, he can't do a Hurricane Rana. He can't do a Tope El Suicida. No shit. I'm thinking that he's a step or two away from being unlicensable. And if I can't get him a license, because a lot of states are still adhering to the licenses, athletic commissions.
Right.
Even though the cat was out of the bag, it didn't mean anything. And some states didn't care about the cat being out of the bag. They wanted these guys to be healthy. And I think that's a great thing. But that's where we were with him. My concern, he's such a sweetheart of a guy. And goddamn, man, it's like you're going to pull a William Perry on my ass. You're going to eat yourself out of a job. And for those who don't know, William Perry was a nose tackle for the Chicago Bears, big defensive player. But William Perry kept getting bigger and bigger and bigger. And he got to be well over 300 pounds. And so the Bears had to say adios at some point in time. You can't stay healthy that size. So that was my issue. It wasn't the fact that I was, he couldn't function. He could still he could do giant things. He just got bad advice, I believe, in the early going because he could do non-giant things that he didn't need to do.
Right.
So anyway, yeah, I was concerned. I don't think he took it seriously. And the only way you can get talent to take you seriously is to affect their money. That's it. What else is it going to do? You got to write me a theme.
Right.
You got to go in the classroom and write, I will eat less. I will lose weight. I will lose weight 100 times. So we hadn't got his attention. Now I look at him today. Looks great. He didn't look to be unhealthy.
Right.
He's lost a lot of weight. He's probably lost 100 pounds.
Yeah.
He looks excellent. So I'm proud. He could always do it, but I think he got influenced by he was very influenceable. if that makes sense. That's even a word. He listened to the last guy that talked to him sometimes, and some of the guys that talked to him, it was all about size, get bigger. Look at Andre, different era, different generation. Oh yeah. And by the way, Andre died at 41 or 2.
Right.
So yeah, look at Andre. He's in a goddamn massive casket someplace, no, actually he got his ashes put in an urn that weighed 17 pounds. I think it was. So yeah, I was disappointed, Conrad, but not for the reasons that the wrestling fans might perceive it to be. So, but Paulie he's such a good guy in the locker room. He's become a good leader, but he was like Mark Henry and Vader. They just had bad nutrition habits. They weren't bad people, but I knew sooner than later they were not going to be able to get licensed if we didn't do something about nipping in the bud their weight gain. So that's where we were with that. So I was disappointed.
Big Show has a big spot here. Once he's eliminated, he chokeslams The Rock through an announce table before leaving. So that gives Rock a few minutes to sell. And then we see Crash Holly come in, followed by the Undertaker. Once Undertaker and Kane are back together, they just clear house, which is a fun little moment to see. I want to mention too, there is another surprise here. Haku is here. And Haku, I don't think everybody, maybe even at the time, realized this. This same week, he won the hardcore title in WCW, but now he's in the Royal Rumble for the WWF. Do you remember how Haku came to join the company and be a surprise here, fresh off of WCW TV?
Part of the family, he's got the Afasika lineage and all that, the Samoan, the island thing going, and those island guys have always earned great respect from the company. Look at Roman Reigns right now, and the Usos getting a big break. They're well thought of there, as they should be. But Haku is just one of the guys. It's another nostalgia guy. He had a variety of names, as we all remember, but he was one of the old. He was an alumni, so to speak, and deserved the booking, quite frankly. But it's the same deal, nostalgia. But he looked good. He looked great. But I had no problem with that booking either. He got a nice payday, helped him and his family that day, and so it all worked out pretty good.
Next up, we should talk about the finishing sequence. It's a big Rock Austin spot with Kane on the outside. They're going to trade punches. The Rock's going to come out on the better side here. Fans aren't booing either man, but they're popping huge for Austin's stunner on the Rock. Rock's going to come back and do the Rock bottom on a bloody Austin. They throw Kane in the out through the middle rope, and that's when they continue to brawl towards the corner. Finally, Kane goes in for the signature battle royal finish where he dumps both guys, but Rock goes over at 59:09, whereas Austin rolls back in the ring. This leaves Austin and Kane. Kane has lasted 54 minutes and 55 seconds here. Quite a performance. He hits a choke slam, and Austin hits yet another stunner. And then Austin nails Kane with 3 hard chair shots, clotheslines him over the top. Austin is your winner for the third time, 3.25 stars. I like the finish, and it gave the fans a tease for the Rock Austin showdown they were going to get at WrestleMania, right?
Yeah, it did. It was exactly what it set up for. That finish was a promotional vehicle for WrestleMania 17's main event. Simple as that. Very basic, fundamental logic and booking. So the kudos should go to a 6'9", 300-pound guy that stayed almost an hour.
Right.
54 minutes in Kane. Pretty damn impressive when you think about it, because I don't know that anybody, somebody will know this. I'm sure some of our listeners, our viewers will know that I don't know anybody that big, that size, I'm talking about size-wise,
right,
ever lasted that long in a Rumble match. I can't think of anybody that's a hell of a odyssey.
Let's talk about him for a minute. He had 11 eliminations in the match, which is a record at the time. Eventually Roman would break it with 12 and Braun would break it with 13, but Kane lasts so long, to your point. He's the final man in the match who's eliminated. This feels like he's on the upward trajectory. Usually whenever you see something like this happen, where a guy puts on a show and is the longest lasting, he's in line for a big push. We don't exactly see that here with Kane. Was there a lot of stops and starts with Kane, or was he always just positioned more as an attraction, in your opinion?
Well, he started out as an attraction and as a primary dancing partner with Undertaker. The Brothers of Destruction evolved and so forth. So Kane proved his worth daily in our company at that time. And the other thing that people didn't see, and that people of Knox County, Tennessee have seen, he's a leader. You know, he's got an elected office. And I don't know. I think that there's so many things that Glenn contributed to our company at that time, and well deserved. So his role, it kept expanding and evolving. And I know Austin loved to work with Glenn, and that never hurt you.
No.
When Austin's the top guy, you know, Kane beat Austin that first blood match to become the champion. And then he lost it the next night, but nonetheless, he was there in that particular arena. So, I don't know, Conrad, he was just his career kept evolving. And when I think a lot of people, he opened a lot of eyes by his tenure in that Royal Rumble match. It was just kind of unheard of for a guy his size. You know what I'm saying?
Right.
Just unbelievable. But he was always in great condition. You know, Glenn was a great athlete. You know, when I saw him, we talked about this a little bit, and I'm not going to harp on it, but the Masked Man in Smoky Mountain Wrestling was when I first saw him, I said, "My God, what are you?" It's almost like you think, thought cloud, what the hell are you doing here?
Right.
And you need to be someplace where you can be seen by a lot of people. Because I think, you know, he was so athletic. I think Glenn may have played college basketball and football. Small college, but still, in Missouri, I believe it was. Northwest Missouri or something along those lines. So, but he was such a sweetheart of a guy and a good man.
Northeast Missouri State, now known as Truman State University, both basketball and football.
Yeah, so there you go. Pretty good athlete, man. And he proved that. So one of our best signees. I love Glenn. He's a good dude. He wrote me the nicest inscription on his book that I think I've ever gotten from anybody. It's brought tears to my eyes because he's so thankful that, you know, I helped. I didn't get it done. I mean, I got it done, but I helped get him in front of the decision maker.
Right.
And it's funny, you know, when I was describing him, because Vince had no clue who he was. I don't think Vince was, I'm going on a limb here, Conrad. Bear with me. I don't think Vince was a regular watcher of Smoky Mountain Wrestling.
What?
It's hard to yes, I know. Wait, give me the benefit of the doubt. I don't think it was. So he said, well, who does he look like? Who does he remind you of? I said, he looks like Sid. He's 6'9". You know, he's a lot better athlete than Sid was. Sid had the look, the face, you know. But Glenn was just, I said, he looked like Psycho Sid. Well, I need to see him. So that's when I brought him to TV, and Vince fell in love with him night one.
Let's talk about somebody else who maybe has fallen out of favor with Vince. Maybe not. I want you to sort of clear it up for me. Taz. He began the year before at the Royal Rumble, Madison Square Garden, and what a performance it was, choking out Kurt Angle, handing Kurt Angle his first loss. It's a major moment. And now he's back just 1 year later, Royal Rumble 2001. He's only in the match for 10 seconds. It's like up there with Bushwhacker Luke, just in and out. What's the story with Taz's elimination? Was he hurt? Was he falling out of favor? It feels like he's booked more as a comedy act, and a year before he's handing Kurt Angle his first loss.
Well, there was a lot of, when I hired Taz, it was funny. I got a message from my secretary that says, those little, I'm sure you probably got them too, the little sheets of paper or the little things where who called you, when they called, number.
Sure. Yeah.
So I got this call from this 917 number, as I recall. And the guy's name was Peter Cernicchia. And I didn't have a goddamn clue who Peter Cernicchia was.
Right.
I knew who Taz was.
Sure.
But I didn't know his real name. again, that kind of speaks back to that original earlier in the show. We talked about, did I pay attention to the minute by minutes of WCW, blah, blah, blah. No. And I also didn't pay attention to other people in other territories' real names. If I didn't need to know the real name, well, I committed to memory. So anyway, he wanted to leave ECW, like all those guys. Those are the easiest guys to sign because the ECW guys knew that if we got them a fair number and they got over, they're going to make a lot more money, and they did. And the fact that they didn't have the drama of getting paid. Think about that. You want to shit on your company, Conrad, then all you got to do is not pay people on time.
Yeah.
That's easy.
That'll happen.
Yeah. That'll happen every time. What's wrong? What's going on? So I brought Taz in. I thought he was an attraction kind of guy. I thought that he would do us a good job if he was booked in the same basic mold that he was booked in ECW. The one thing about Paul Heyman, who's brilliant, there's no doubt about it, is that he could see, he had the great ability, Heyman did, to accentuate a talent's positives and disguise their negatives.
Yep. And
so Paul made Taz so strong that you forgot that he was 5'8". You know, he was not what the business was getting a regular diet of. He was thick, he was athletic, he was a strong guy, but he was short. But I battled that whole thing many times with other talents.
Right.
Jericho, Benoit, Malenko, Eddie. Jeez, I had a pitch down for that. He's too short. You know, well, the people believe in him.
Right.
So I saw how the audience believed in Taz. If you put him in the offense, using football parlance, if you put Taz in an offense that could, and the system was conducive to his skill set, his skills all around, he'll help you. He'll help you win games. That's what I thought about Taz. But I can't say that I was I was definitely in the minority. So I guess at the end of the day, Vince trusted my judgment, but then he got unconvinced. I don't know if it's after meeting Taz. I have no idea. I really don't know. But bottom line is that he fell out of favor, and a lot of the people that he could have drawn money working with believed that them selling him a guy that was 5'8" didn't make any sense, and people would not believe it. Even though Taz could probably whip their ass in a real shoot, but that we weren't shooting.
Right.
We were working. So I think that's where that was, Conrad, because nobody could have had a better debut in Madison Square Garden from a guy from Red Hook, Brooklyn, all that shit, than Taz got. And he beat Kurt Angle by submission. He choked his ass out. And people thought his suplexes were dangerous, all this other stuff. So a lot of the talents get back to Vince and say, I don't really want to work with this guy. He's dangerous. So they'd tell me that, but they tell Vince that. And when he heard it enough, and Vince saw that a lot of the top talents were uncomfortable and stepped in the ring with Taz, he finally took it to heart. And so Taz became, he got hurt, tore a bicep or tricep, I can't remember what. And I remember where I was standing. I think Bruce and I were talking to him after that show. He was very worried about getting cut because he had to have surgery. He almost just got there, seemingly.
Right.
And I said, you're going to get your checks just like you do if you're working. And I think he looked at me incredulously like I was bullshitting him. I mean, just go to your mailbox every week. You'll see it'll be there. So that's where that was. I just think a lot of the top talents, I say, enough of the top talents convinced McMahon that Taz was not a good hire and he was limited on what he could do. And the suplexes were dangerous, blah, blah, blah. And so he fell out of favor and then eventually became a broadcaster. But this, to have if you want a message sent to somebody, have a 20-second match in the Royal Rumble.
Oh my gosh. Yeah. I mean, this was a guy who was as you said, very believable to fans. I mean,
Yeah.
I thought he was a murderer, and he's in and out in the old Bushwhacker Luke spot. And it's like, what the fuck happened?
Right.
Well, here's the thing Meltzer was blown away with in the show. And what was one of the best pay-per-views in the history of the WWF, the company gave a big tease for the eventual Rock Austin match will at some point look to be the headliner at WrestleMania, putting Austin over in the Rumble. The show, featuring some highs, some strong highs, and only a few lows, featured an early match of the year candidate in the Jericho IC title win over Benoit in a ladder match. The match was different than most ladder matches and a change of pace from original thoughts. The original idea was to use multiple ladders, break ladders, and revolve the match around ladder spots. Instead, they went with an approach that would see them not have to top previous ladder matches for the multitude of crazy ladder spots by revolving much of the match around actual wrestling, but throwing in enough ladder spots that nobody felt like they weren't getting the gimmick. I think that really was the trick to that ladder match. They didn't try to say, can you top this with maybe some of the crazy car crashes, and instead incorporated enough wrestling where it felt different, and it was awesome.
Well, I'm sure Jericho, excuse me, I'm sure that Benoit had a hand in some of the creative, but the majority of that was Jericho.
Right.
And as Jericho proves on a regular basis in AEW, he's got a great booking mind. He's very creative. And when you can take a group of guys, Santana, Ortiz, Jake Hager, Sammy Guevara, don't leave anybody out other than MJF, who's and Wardlow, but that original inner circle, those guys were not, I don't want to say they're unknowns, but on a national level, the only guy that had any name identity was Hager.
Right.
And he didn't have it as Hager. He had his swagger. So Jericho's proven on a regular basis for us on Wednesday nights on TNT that he's got a brilliant mind, and he's fun to do commentary with. He shares his own thoughts and things of that nature. I love that. But I think Jericho had a huge influence in how that match was laid out, and those guys were careful because they knew that the Edge and Christian, Hardy's, Dudley's triumphant in ladder matches was going to be very, very difficult to top. You know, it's like I asked somebody the other day, we're talking about, reeling in some of the things that they do for these magnificent high spots that never beat anybody. And the one that I kid about, it's almost become a tongue-in-cheek thing now, is for, again, all the congregants gather at the river. They stand in place so they can catch somebody jumping over the top. Nobody ever gets hurt. Nobody ever loses. It rarely ever leads to a finish. It's just a spot. And the first time I saw it, I loved it. I probably loved it the first 10 times I saw it. But now if you see it once or twice a show, on anybody's show, it loses its luster.
Right.
That's the way it is. So I think Jericho had a big hand with that, but they didn't want to travel the same road that those other three teams traveled and try to top what they did, because this was a ladder match that's going to have big spots. It's for a championship with two guys. So it had to have a different mindset and a different game plan. So I credit, and I don't know who the agent was for that match back in those days, but I can tell you that Jericho had a big hand in structuring the match. And then, of course, you got Benoit, who was just great at executing them. So I like that match. That's why to me, it was hands down the best presentation on the show.
Well, I think this was a great show. One of my favorite Royal Rumbles. Where does this rank all time for you, Jim, amongst your favorite Royal Rumble matches?
Oh, golly, Conrad. It's right up there in the top, in the discussion of the top ones I got to call. You know, that was always the hardest pay-per-view before the brand split. The Royal Rumble was the hardest pay-per-view, most challenging pay-per-view to call for the announcers. Because it's the two of us, normally Lawler and I, doing the whole show. And then you knew that at the end of the night, if you're going to close the Rumble, it's going to be an hour or somewhere thereabouts.
Right.
So the tenure you're sitting out there, knowing that you're very happy dressed in dark colors because you got to pee like a racehorse, it was always daunting. So it was always the most challenging show to do, because we also knew, in all seriousness, that we had to get things over and set the table for WrestleMania. That was imperative. So, but I think it was one of the better ones. I can't think of any that I liked a whole lot better, but I'd have to go back and do some due diligence. There may have been better main events. Like I said, the finish, the match with Triple H and Kurt was a really good match.
Yeah.
It didn't need Austin, in my opinion, but that's just my opinion. Doesn't matter now. But I thought that the Rumble match itself had a lot of personality. The use of gimmicks was new, kind of half-assed new. And that was almost seemed obligatory and predictable because it was the Attitude Era and quote unquote, almost anything goes. So it's one of the top ones. It was one of the top pay-per-views, Royal Rumbles that I saw.
Well, we hope you guys enjoyed our revisiting of Royal Rumble 2001. We're going to be back next week with something really fun. Before I tell you about that, I want to tell you we'll wrap the month up here on January 28th, talking about Hardcore Holly, a profile piece on one of the unsung heroes for a long time of the World Wrestling Federation. But next week, something a little different. We're going to do a crossover with 83 Weeks, and we're going to have Eric Bischoff watch the January 19th, 1998 Monday Night Raw. What happened that night? Steve Austin and Mike Tyson getting a shoving match. Here on Grilling JR, we're going to have Jim watch the Nitro from the same night. On that show, you'll see from New Orleans, of all places, where we're talking about this show happening today here, the Royal Rumble. This is a dome show. That's right. Nitro at the Superdome. I think in hindsight, people just talk about Raw. Nobody really talks about Nitro that night. We're going to talk about it next week. You've got Rick Martel working with Eddie Guerrero, Chris Benoit working with Marty Jannetty, Ernest Miller in there with Jerry Flynn, the Steiner brothers taking on Buff Bagwell and Conan, the World TV title on the line when Booker T defends against Mortis, Chris Jericho's in there with Juventud Guerrera, Lex Luger works with Scott Hall, and your main event from the Superdome is the Giant and Hollywood Hogan. So we're going to have Jim watch that Nitro, perhaps for the first time. Is there any chance you've actually seen that show?
Shit, no. Are you kidding me? No. And that's no disrespect to them or Eric or anybody. I like Eric. Eric's my buddy. No, man. Again, the lifestyle that I was living at that time, I didn't have time to go watch wrestling.
Right.
I watched our shit. You got a talent roster to manage. You got guys to pay. You got house show. House show business was big for us. And the cards had to continue to be packed and powerful and unique, using all the established components that I was using. So no, I've never seen it. So it'll be a brand new watch for me. And I'm going to be honest with you. I'm not going to watch it until we do the watch along.
I like it.
I'm going to be fresh. And I think Eric's same basic philosophy. Our goal there is not to knock everybody else's work. We're going to tell you our feelings and observations, but I don't plan on going there and gut and quartering the show. But I'm kind of, quite frankly, I'm anxious to see it.
Well, if you're gut and quartering some meat around the house, because it is indeed grilling season as we march towards the Super Bowl, may I recommend jrsbbq.com? I think it makes everything taste a little better. I mean, I've got friends who put your all-purpose seasoning, not just on their pork, but they put it on their chicken. Hell, they put it on their popcorn. They put it in their eggs. It really is all purpose. And don't get me started on the barbecue sauce. That's world famous now, right, Jim?
We're trying to make it such, Conrad. The all-purpose seasoning on New Year's Day, I bought this pan that has these ridges in it that creates grill marks because I can't have a grill here at my condo. Against house rules. And I had a bone-in pork chop about that thick. And I had collard greens. People wonder why the people eat collard greens. Collard greens are for wealth. And I had black-eyed peas. And the old Southern thing is that black-eyed peas are for health. Wealth, good health, good wealth, black-eyed peas, collard greens. I didn't use any seasoning except my seasoning. On the vegetables, on the meat, the whole 9 yards. So I had, just a night or two ago, I had some amazing ravioli because I've come to know Conrad, and thank God you're not single and you're not alone. But I figured out that I'm doing a better job of doing when I cook a one dish meal. So I got these real cool bowls. They're pretty good size, as you can imagine. And I had this Italian beef ravioli. Because all you got to do, goddamn, is boil water. Get the water boil and put your ravioli in there. The only thing I used for that to season the water was JR seasoning.
Mm.
It was great. I'm serious. So we've been really blessed. We had a phenomenal year at our little website. And I hope that along the way that our customer service and our products convince people to make us a regular stop from time to time. We're always going to have good deals. You're going to get taken care of. If you got any complaints or any issues, we can't control shipping. We can get it to the shipper, but we can't make them deliver it on time. But by and large, we've done a pretty good job. So hopefully people will go to jrsbbq.com and check it out. As I said before, Conrad, it doesn't cost anything to look.
Right.
Go on, look at the site, and Stephen Link runs that for me, and he does a great job. He's becoming friends with a lot of our customers, and they know they can count on him. He gives them an honest answer. If he tells you it's going to go out today, it's going to go out today. So it's all good stuff. So the mustard is a big hit. I love the mustard. Mustard changes your life on a sandwich.
Oh yeah.
Hey, do you eat? I'm thinking about creating a hot sauce.
Oh yeah. I'm going to tell you now, Silva's going to wear you out. He's going to get it all.
Bull Ramus
eats it all.
Hey, Silva put a picture on Twitter the other day. It was a cute picture of his mom and dad.
There ain't no denying that boy, is it?
I said, that son of a bitch ain't adopted.
No,
he came out of that man's loins.
Yes, he did.
As old Jackie Gleason would say in the whatever it was. Anyway, we were having fun doing it. The site's good and business has been solid. But it couldn't happen without being able to talk about it here a little bit and the fans checking it out, just giving it a try. That's all we ever ask. Try it. It may become your go-to. If it is, then we win and you win.
See what you think. jrsbbq.com, and join us here next week. We're going to watch a very special edition of Monday Nitro. It's a major night in the history of the Monday Night Wars. On the other channel, of course, it's Mike Tyson, but we've got a Nitro from the Superdome. And wow.
Maybe the greatest night in the history of our sport.
Oh my gosh. Thank you for that. We'll be back next week right here on Grillin' JR with the voice of wrestling, Mr. Jim Ross.
And by God, heavy on the mister. Take care of yourself, everybody, and thanks for watching.
Hey, it's Conrad Thompson. Thanks for checking out the podcast here on YouTube. Be sure to hit the subscribe button and the notifications bell so you get a notice anytime we upload some new content. And go save yourself some money right now. If you're in a 30-year loan or you have credit card debt, it's not a matter of if I can save you money. It's a matter of how much. Find out right now for free at SaveWithConrad.com.